Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Old Time Rock and Roll. I'm your host, David Tare, where I've been featuring my personal top 3,000 songs of the rock era from 1954 to 1999. And today I'm up to song number 2692, and that one is Blow Away by George Harrison. And I think you guys probably all know that George Harrison was one of the members of the Beatles. I guess he was kind of the guitarist along with, John and Paul. I mean, they all did pretty much all different kinds of music, and he was also vocalist. And he wrote a few of his own songs when he was with the Beatles. But Paul and John wrote most of their music, as I think you guys probably know. But he wrote a few pretty great songs. Actually, I think he wrote some of the Beatles' best songs, including While My Guitar Gently Weeps and Something and Tax Man, I think. Anyway, he's a great musician, I think, and I think he was one of the best solo artists of all the Beatles after they broke up. Yeah, and there's not too much to say about the song "Blow Away." I think it's just kind of a love song, a little bit of a trippy love song. I don't know what he means by "blow away," but he's singing, "All I've got to do is to love you, and all I got to be is to be happy." I think it's mainly just about kind of going with the flow and just concentrating on the things that are important in life, like love and just enjoying nature. I mean, that's kind of was his philosophy. And by the way, and maybe I should show you. I mean, this song was also released on his album that was just called George Harrison. It was released in 1979, and it wasn't a huge hit. I mean, I think it went to number 16. It wasn't one of his biggest hits, but I like it, and I like most of his songs. And here's a picture of George. I think shortly after the Beatles broke up, when he was singing solo. And I guess maybe I should say a little bit more about George Harrison. Like I said, I really like him. I think he was kind of similar to John in a lot of ways. I think John and George were both into TM, Transcendental Meditation. They both kind of went in this kind of mystical, Indian philosophy direction in the late '60s. I think Paul stayed more mainstream, but um, I don't know. I mean, I think John kind of went off the deep end on this stuff. I think George kind of kept it under control. At least that's my opinion. And I watched a really good movie. I guess it was a documentary about him called "Living in the Material World." I watched this a few years ago, and I think that movie really made me appreciate him and his music a lot more. I think. I mean, you know, I think they were all great. I think all the Beatles were great. Even Ringo. I mean, Ringo was just a drummer. Ring actually sang. I don't know if he wrote any of the Beatles songs, but he sang on several of them. And I mean, I'm featuring all of the ex Beatles have solo hits on my list, and I think they were all great. And including George. And unfortunately, George had a very tragic death. The last few years of his life were very tragic, kind of like John Lennon, but maybe even worse. I mean, John was just shot, killed, which was terrible enough. But with George, he was actually stabbed about 40 times by some madman who broke into his house. He stabbed him and his wife. And he lived with all these wounds for like 2 years afterwards. It was a horrible, horrible thing. I mean, I don't know what's with some of these madmen. I don't know if it was just a coincidence that John and George were both basically murdered by madmen. I don't know what was with all that. Very tragic. But, George gave us some really great music. If it's any consolation, he did live a lot, about 20 years longer than John. But, very sad. But he had some great songs. I guess before I get off, I should go through his solo hits. So I'm just going to go through all his solo hits. His first solo hit, which was just shortly after the Beatles broke up, the same year, in fact, was My Sweet Lord. That went to number one. It was an international number one. I think it was number one in 10 different countries. And, he got in trouble for that song, unfortunately. I think it's a really excellent song. It's in a way, it's kind of a peace anthem, I think. I mean, he's trying to unite. I think in that song, he was trying to unite Eastern and Western religion. He's talking about my sweet Lord, and I assume he's talking about, the God from the Bible. But then in the background you hear Hari Krishna, Hari Rama, so he's kind of appealing to Eastern religion as well. And unfortunately, got in a lot of trouble for that song because I guess Bright Records, who he was recording for, sued him for millions of dollars because it had the same melody basically as another hit song, "He's So Fine" by the Chiffons, which was a big kind of doo-wop hit in the early 60s. And they do have the same melody, but I think they sound very different. And George claimed that it was just subconscious, that he wasn't consciously stealing the melody. And I think I believe that. I've heard other songs that are much more blatant copies of the original. And a lot of times they get away with it too, you know. But anyway, enough of that. That was his first hit. Probably his biggest. He had two number ones, but I think that was the bigger. He actually had three number ones. And let me just keep going through his hits. So 1971, he had a hit with a B-side of My Sweet Lord, which was What Is Life? Another really excellent song, in my opinion. That went to number 10. Then he had kind of weird. He had a two-sided hit later in 1971, Bangladesh and Deep Blue. That went to number 23. And then in 1973, he had a second number one, which was Give Me Love, subtitled Give Me Peace on Earth, another kind of peace anthem. In 1974, he had a song called Dark Horse, which went to number 15. And later that year, he had Ding Dong, Ding Dong, which went to 36. In 1975, he had a song called You, which went to number 20. In 1976, he had a song called This Song, which went to number 25. Actually, I know something interesting about this song. It was a response to the lawsuit. Because there's a line in the song where he says, "This song, there's nothing bright about it," and that was a blatant reference to Bright Records, who had sued him. I guess he was claiming with this song is that this song was an original composition of his, and it didn't sound like anything else before it. So maybe it was fitting that he wrote this song. And then in 1977, he had Cracker Box Palace, which went to number 20. Kind of an interesting song. I think he even made a video of it, which was kind of weird. In 1979, he had another, the one I'm featuring today, Blow Away. And like I said, that one went to number 16. This is a really cool video, by the way. If you haven't seen the video for Blow Away, I think you should watch it. It might blow you away. It's different, but I do like it. And in 1981, he had a tribute to John Lennon, who had just recently been killed. It was called All Those Years Ago, and it was kind of a nostalgia song about the early years of the Beatles, mainly concerning John and the group. I think the song is kind of sang to him or dedicated to him. That one went to number 2. In 1982, he had a song called Wake Up My Love, which went to 53. Didn't make the top 40. In 1987, he had his third number one, which was Got My Mind Set on You. And I believe that was a cover of another song from the 50s, but I don't know who did the original. I think it was actually a medley of two. There was Got My Mind Set on You, and then there's part of the song where he says it's going to take money, it's going to take time to do it right. And I think that was a different song he spliced into it. And then 1988, he had When We Was Fab. I guess that was another look back at the Beatles. That one's number 23. And finally, in 2002, he had a reissue of My Sweet Lord, which went to number 94. So those were his hits. Like I said, a really, really great musician, and definitely worthy of being a Beatle, both with the Beatles and without the Beatles, I think. So anyway, that completes my profile on Blow Away by George Harrison. Thank you for watching. You guys rock, and I'll see you next time.